Is past lives a thing?
Basically, it's a wake-up call, and it just says reality is more complicated than you thought.
What is a reactivation of trauma when people feel triggered?
It's just fear.
So here's the question everybody wants to know. How do you change who you are?
There is a deep thing inside of you that says, I want to be different. I want to not be reactive, not get angry, not get upset, not even get stressed.
This is maybe one of the most important clarifications in terms of extrasensory perception that I think is out there.
Learning paranormal things is an exercise that you go through to help develop your intuitive side. But that intuitive side opens you up to becoming love, opens you up to more information, more choices, a bigger decision space. And suddenly you see yourself as a part of something a whole lot bigger than you. Logic requires a lot of information. Mostly you don't have that much information. I tend to live my life out of my intuition. When I sit down, and let's say I meet you two, I walk in, I meet you two. Well, I immediately get information about both of you.
What'd you see? Welcome back to our breakdown. Today is part 2 with Thomas Campbell, physicist and author of My Big T.O.E, his theory of everything. If you haven't heard the first episode, you cannot listen to the second one without going back and hearing the first. You could.
You could listen.
You could.
It holds up on its own, but there is so much good information in part 1.
Yes, we're going to be talking today about meditation, practical meditation tips, why binaural beats and a certain particular frequency can help you get into meditation. We're also going to talk about trauma, fear, the intellectual processing we do that can take the place of the intuitive sense that we need to live in. We're also going to talk about some paranormal stuff, past lives, and also ways to sort of approach your life with an opening of understanding there's an infinite number of possibilities that you've already lived and that you could live, and you get to experience the data of them all.
One of the best explanations for how fear actually creates the thing that we're afraid of. I'm wildly excited to dive into the second part of this episode.
Without further ado, here is Thomas Campbell back at the breakdown. Break it down. So some of the movement that we've seen, and you've seen it in your lifetime, and we're seeing kind of a resurgence of it, is a strong emphasis on transcendental experiences. And in many cases, people are using drugs to get there. And, Timothy Leary had an entire platform, about this, the notion that, people who have an advanced consciousness, people who are in touch with something greater than themselves, people who have an experience of God is love, or that we're all one, right? Which, there are drugs that can induce these states, as it were. For some people, that is a pathway there. What's your sort of interpretation in terms of using that as a tool to access this consciousness?
I think it's the wrong way to go. I think it's not, it may be helpful around the edges, but it's not the main course, okay? And the reason I say that is that everything that the drugs allow a person to do, you can do without the drugs. None of those require drugs. Now, if you learn to do that on your own, you understand what you get. You know what you get. You're a part of what you're connecting to. You understand all the connections. When you get blasted into the non-physical, with a drug rocket, and then you crash on the other side. Oh, geez, that was awesome. That was beautiful colors and this and that, and I was one with everything, and yeah, that was really great. But that doesn't help you grow up any. It doesn't really help you grow up any. You're still the same person. Now, okay, your beliefs have changed. Beliefs aren't the thing. You have to change who you are. You have to become kinder. It's not that you act kind. Now, maybe that'll get a lot of people to act better. Oh, yeah, I say it. It's all about love. Okay, I'll act better. See that little old lady? I'll help her across the street. That's not the point. It's not acting kind that's valuable. It's being kind that's valuable. And that only happens if you change who you are. Taking a drug doesn't help you change who you are. It may give you a bigger picture, but it's a bigger picture that you can believe in, but it's not really your experience. You don't own it. You don't learn from it like you learn from it when you do it organically yourself. So you have to make changes in order to do those things. And it's a changing process, like all the paranormal things. The paranormal things aren't important in and of themselves. And anybody who does paranormal things eventually grows out of it. You don't do it anymore. You quit. You stop with it because you realize everything is just the way it's supposed to be. It's a process. Learning paranormal things is an exercise that you go through to help develop your intuitive side. But that intuitive side opens you up to becoming love, opens you up to more information, more choices, a bigger decision space. And suddenly you see yourself as a part of something a whole lot bigger than you. And this something is intelligent, is aware, is real, and you can connect to it. But if you don't develop that intuitive side, then it's all theory. Oh, yes, I should do this. I should pray 6 times a day. I should whatever. It's just, it's going through the motions. And you get blown up on a drug rocket, and it's the same thing. You're taking the pill, but you're not really owning the experience. You're just having the experience. So it's like going on a roller coaster and you go, wow, that was great. Let's do it again. But it doesn't really change who you are. It's a peak experience in your life. You'll always remember that roller coaster with its 10 flips, but it didn't really change you any. So that's the way drug is. It doesn't really change people. And I've noticed that it does something that's not so good with people. It makes them feel like they're more spiritual and they have a deeper understanding. Oh, I've shook the hand of God and I've been there and I felt I was one with all existence. And yeah, I got that now. I'm so much better off. And they start thinking that they've gained spiritually because of their experience. And experience does not cause you to be spiritual. That has to be changing who you are at a fundamental level.
So here's the question everybody wants to know. How do you change who you are?
Well, there are some processes that help, but the main thing is that you have to really want to. Now, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I'd love to grow up and I'd love to change. I'll help the little old lady across the street. But again, they're working out of their intellect. They're trying to be grown up. Okay, it's like 12-year-olds, right? They're really trying real hard to be grown up, but they're not grown up. They have to change who they are to grow up. Well, it's the same way. So the most important thing is that you really want to. And that sounds pretty easy, but it isn't. To really want to means that there is a deep thing inside of you that says, I want to be different. I want to not be reactive, not get angry, not get upset, not even get stressed. I want to not, somebody insults me, I want to not fight back. I want to not do any of those things. I just want to be love and caring for people. And if somebody's rude to me, well, gee, maybe I can help them see it from a different perspective rather than reacting to it and getting angry. I need to get rid of my ego. I need to get rid of my beliefs. I need to get rid of my fear. And if you really want to do it, then it'll happen because your intent will modify future probability and you will become it. But you have to want to do it seriously. Now, if all you want to do is look better, then it won't help. You can do all those things, but it's not about doing, it's about being. And being can only be done if you have a real serious desire to change who you are. You see yourself as the problem. You take responsibility for who you are. You can't say, oh, George made me angry. He made me so angry. Well, George didn't make you angry. You chose to be angry. There was some fear in you that when George said that, it triggered that fear, and you come up and you're angry. Take responsibility for it. Don't blame George. So when you take responsibility for who you are, take responsibility for your fear and your ego, and you want to change, you will, because you will automatically do those things you need to do to change. You'll start looking and say, what are my fears? You know, what is it that triggers me? Why do I get upset? Why do I feel stressed? And you'll find it, and you'll say, oh, okay, I feel kind of insignificant. I feel like I'm not really doing up to my ability. I feel I haven't helped enough people, or I'm feeling insecure. And because of that insecurity, somebody mentions something about me doing something wrong, I get angry because it triggers that insecurity that I have. So now I'm going to have to work on that. When somebody tells me I'm doing something wrong, I'm going to not react that way. And I'm going to not be that way. But the first step is not reacting that way. Step one, intellectual. You got to do that first because you have to be aware of it. Be aware of the changes you need to make. That's the intellect. But then you have to actually be them. Not just pretend and not just act, but be them. And if you really want to do it, you'll change. You'll just start changing, and those fears will start to fall away, and you'll feel lighter. You'll feel better. Your stress levels will go down, and you'll be healthier. And instead of eating a box of chocolates, you'll want to eat, a box of spinach, because your body just is telling you that's
your
what
your metabolic needs and your physiology actually does change from those sorts of things.
It does change from those things, yes. And your whole interest in what you want to do and what you spend your time doing, will change. But it changes from the inside out as you grow. And once you start, you won't notice it at first. But the way you see whether you're growing or not is two things. One, you look back, say, where was I, the last 5 years? How am I? Am I the same way? And if you're the same way, then you haven't been growing. Usually, people looking back of, wow, I was like that. Yeah, I remember that. I'd get angry, I'd get upset. I was always crosswise with my coworkers, and now I'm not. So you'll see it looking back. As it happens, you hardly notice because it happens just in little tiny increments every day.
My Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Notion.
Like so many of you, I spend a lot of time dealing with my emails, too much time. And by the time I would be done responding to everything that needed responding to and organizing and weeding through the junk, I'd look at the clock and many hours easily passed. Good thing the brand new Notion Mail is here. It's been a total game changer for our productivity. My favorite thing so far about Notion Mail is all of these incredible custom view and filtering options that they have. It helps me sort and view the exact batch of emails that I'm looking for with literally the snap of a finger. Notion Mail is the inbox that thinks like you. Automated, personalized, and flexible to finally work the way you work. With AI that learns what matters to you, it can organize your inbox, label messages, draft replies, and even schedule meetings, no manual sorting required. It's amazing. Tell Notion AI what types of emails are important to you, and it will automatically label and sort them as they arrive. Split your inbox into custom views like topic, urgency, sender, or any way that you need to stay focused and distraction-free. Use one-click email templates to quickly send whatever's repetitive for you, like intros, follow-ups, thank you notes. You can even include attachments and scheduling links. Write beautiful emails faster, go beyond text, use content blocks that can be customized and rearranged. If you're a Notion user already, Notion Mail integrates with your account and uses your Notion docs for context too, which is awesome. So everything works together in one place. Notion Mail is powered by Notion, which is used by over half of Fortune 500 companies. Notion's known for powerful connectivity, intuitive functionality, beautiful design, and the ability to supercharge productivity. Now they're leveling up your inbox. Get Notion Mail for free right now at notion.com/break and try the inbox that thinks like you. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/break to get Notion Mail for free right now.
When you use our link, you're supporting our show, notion.com/break.
So one of the things though, and most people need a little more help. They need a little structure. They need a little support. The way you describe, getting in touch with consciousness, it makes sense that a program to develop your consciousness should naturally start with finding and becoming acquainted with that consciousness.
Yes.
So one of the things you talk about is meditation is almost universally prescribed as the first step, the doorway to understanding and exploring consciousness, as well as to the attainment of spiritual growth. So you happened upon meditation, and kind of by accident, you were introduced to Transcendental meditation, which here in Los Angeles is a very, very big business. You pay a lot of money to get your mantra. And I was actually inspired because last night, and you have, it's a really, what I love about your book is you you start out by saying, I'm going to take a lot of digressions, but you indicate them very clearly, and I appreciate that. So that you always get back to the point, but you take a huge, and I don't want to call it a digression, you take us on a huge field trip into understanding one of the most basic ways, and the way that you literally on your first experience were introduced to an ability to examine your own consciousness. And I was inspired. And last night, I was always hung up on like, you got to go get a mantra and you got to pay the money and the thing, and you have to like commit to 4 sessions, and they keep texting you, and like, it's like it feels strange. And so you literally were like, here's some options of mantras. Find one. So I picked one, and I did it. I set a timer for 20 minutes, and I had the longest stretch of sleep that I've had in like a ridiculous amount of time. And yes, it could be coincidence, but I'm going to keep doing it. And when I woke up this morning, it's the first thing I did is I set a timer for 20 minutes and I sat. So one of the things that you do talk about, and you go into the science of it, but I wonder if you can talk about what it is to drop into this space.
You talked a little earlier about having dropped into your childhood. Yes. and had an experience. And that would fall under the category of out of body. Now let's talk a little bit about out of body. What does that mean?
Okay.
What you're doing.
OOB, you call it.
Yeah, OOB.
Yes.
Right. That's a terrible name because you're not in your body. You're not a spirit that lives inside your body. That's old think from probably the 1800s. But you are a piece of consciousness. So you're already in your consciousness.
Right.
And your body's just a computed thing. So out of body means that you have turned off all of your sense data. It's just that simple. So you no longer are seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, tasting. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't say hear. If the phone rings, you'll hear it, but you don't process it. Oh, the phone's ringing. Well, if you're expecting a really important call, then you'll get up and go answer it. But if it's just the phone ringing and you're not expecting anything, you just let it ring till it stops. If you want to, you can think about, oh, I'm sitting. Can I feel the chair? Yes, you can feel the chair underneath of you, but you're not processing it. You get in the same state when you're reading a good book. When you sit down and read a good book and you're into that book, if somebody walks by behind your chair, you don't notice it. Even if somebody talks to you, you may not notice it unless they are loud or come up and touch you. You're in that space with that book. Now, getting into that deep meditation state is doing the same thing without a book. You just don't have the book, but you're in that same state where you are no longer processing your sense data. You can process it. If it's something intrusive, you'll notice it. But in general, you're not processing it. You're not feeling the beds. You're not feeling, you're not hearing the traffic outside. You just shut all that off. And that is your, what I call the point consciousness state. That's the state that I said, when you shut all your sense data off, you're just a point of consciousness floating in a black void. See nothing, hear nothing, whatever. Now that's like the launch point. That's the launch pad when you can do that.
And sometimes you get that, like I've had that literally for like not even a second, and then it's gone.
And then it's gone.
Right.
With practice, you can get there longer. Now, there is another method you can use besides meditation. A lot of people have trouble with meditation, particularly people that have, attention deficit disorder. Meditation
very busy
is a real hard thing because their mind's just buzzing around all the time. So it's just letting go of the physical world. That's the key. You just let go
practice. Of it. You shouldn't assume that if you do it once, you're not the kind of person that can do it. It's like a muscle. It needs to be exercised.
Exactly. You get better at it the longer you do it. Now, there are some aids that'll help. One of them is binaural beats. I've designed a whole set of binaural beats. It's like 30 different binaural beats with different bass frequencies. And so anyway, and I've done that on my about 40 years of dealing with people, teaching them how to do paranormal things, putting them in the state. So I've done that. And over the years...
Can you explain what binaural beats are?
Yeah, a binaural beat is you put two pure tones, one in each ear.
It's an auditory stimulus.
It's an auditory stimulus. So pure tone number one, let's say 100 hertz, goes in this ear. Another, let's say 104 hertz, goes in that ear. Now, they go through the pathways of aural, you're a neuro girl.
Yep.
They go through the pathways. They get to the corpus callosum, which is the membrane between the two hemispheres, and they meet there. And when they meet there, they actually create a beat frequency. When you have a 100 and 104, if you just mix those, say I had a speaker here and a speaker here, 100 and 104, you'd hear a 4 hertz beat.
You're hearing the difference.
You're hearing the difference between the two frequencies. And a 4 hertz beat would be like bum, 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 bum. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Every second you get a count of 4. That's 4 hertz. That's what hertz means, is per second. Okay, so I didn't mean that to you. I meant that to your audience.
No, it just made me happy because I'm a musician, and so when I also teach music to my kids, he's like, "Well, what is 4/4?" And I'm like, "Well, if you want to get metaphysical, it's
So anyway, you actually hear these beats,
right?
Not through your normal hearing, but they're actually beating at the corpus callosum, where the
integration site.
And it's not going through bone conduction or anything else.
No, it's a set of fibers.
They've done enough. Right. They've done enough research on it that it's really beating inside the brain.
Right.
And this has been found just through experimentation.
And by beating, just neuroscientist, by beating, you're talking about the integration of the electrical information, right? But it's the electrical information that's coming into a set of cells that are perceiving this is happening by opening sodium channels. Like it's a whole thing happening that allows you to perceive a beat.
A beat.
Right.
Of 4 hertz.
Right.
With 100 and 104. If it's 100 and 110, you'll hear a 10 hertz beat.
Mm-hmm.
So they have found that this entrains brainwave activity. Mm-hmm. So if your brainwave activity is usually like this, it's going all over, all different kinds of frequencies, coming and going, depending on what's in your mind. Mm-hmm. And what happens is then it'll start to migrate down to 4 hertz. So more of your energy starts to go to 4 hertz. That's what they mean by entraining the brainwave. Mm-hmm. 4 hertz is the basic thing you get with somebody. It's the EEG you get with somebody who's a long-time meditator. Right. So you get a monk out of his,
and they've done these studies.
Out of his cell and put an EEG on him and let him meditate, and you'll see that his energy migrates to around 4 hertz. Mm-hmm. Okay, in that vicinity, could be 3.85 or something.
And so you're picking this up as electrical impulses that can be picked up off the scalp for an EEG.
Yeah, right. EEG just on your head. So that idea that you can drive the brainwaves into a similar state that somebody who's been meditating for 10 years achieves, well, as it turns out, that really helps. If you put these binaural beats on and you listen to them, you will find that getting into the meditation state and holding it is much easier.
Are you following the beats? Like, are you listening to them?
No, it's not listening to them. They just work whether you listen to them or not.
It's a passive experience.
It's a passive experience, yeah. Matter of fact, if you follow the beats, that will be your intellect, and it will be getting in the way, making the thing not work very well.
Right.
You need to just let it be. Let it go. Now, my beats are very complex in the sense that I don't keep the beat frequency the same. I move it around different things for different reasons. I make it run up for a very short time, like 30 seconds. I'll run it up to a low alpha just to wake people up, because a lot of people will lose consciousness when you do this. Right. And so I wake them up every so often, and then I'll drop them actually down into the delta for about 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds, kind of drag them down a little bit, and then I'll go back up to 4, and then I'll go back up to I think I go up to like an 8. And then back to the 4, and then maybe back to the 2.
So what's the 4? Because there's data, there's theta, there's...
4 is around theta.
Great.
That's a theta state.
Yep.
So anyhow, these are the binaural beats, and I sell them at my website, and I don't sell for very much. I'm not really trying to make money. I'm trying to spread the ideas. So, you can buy one for, I don't know, $10 or $15 or something. You buy a whole set of them for $25. But anyway, so the binaural beats help as a training aid. Now, like all training aids, you eventually need to take, the training wheels off the bike. The training wheels will help you ride a bike because they'll keep you from falling over and then scaring you and not wanting to get back on.
But they don't drive the bike.
But if you really want to be good at a bicycle, you can't be good on a bicycle with training wheels attached to the back of it because you won't be able to lean it and turn, and there's things you can't do with them on. Cool. This is the same. This is the same with the binaural beats. They will help the novice who isn't good at meditating to get there and stay there, because these binaural beats that you listen to will last for, say, 50 minutes. So for 50 minutes, you're locked in to that state if you just let them run in your mind, and it will work real well for most people.
Hypnosis is also dropping people into theta, correct?
Yeah, because it drops them out of their intellect.
Right.
Anything that drops you out of your intellect is going to be good.
Right.
So the intellect crashes the intuitive mind. Now, eventually, and we're just changing the subject one after another, but eventually you learn that the intuitive mind and the intellectual mind work together, and they become good friends. And the intuitive mind says, oops, I need a little logic for this, and passes it over there. And the intellect says, I need some information for this. And it gets to the intuitive mind to go get the information. And they work together as a team. But most people, like in our culture, we hone our intellectual capacity and we work on it. We work on it our whole lives. The intuitive side, we just let lie there. We don't use it. So it's way out of balance. They don't work as a team. The intellectual mind works as a bully, and the intuitive mind tries to do something. The intellectual mind jumps in and says, let me take care of that. Oh, you just heard your dead grandfather say something? Nah, that probably wasn't that. That was just your imagination. That's what your intellect tells you, and it just crashes the process. So that's why it's so important to get that intellect to sit down and be quiet enough to let your intellect go, and let your intuitive side go. And that intellect wants to boss, wants to judge, wants to tell you what you're doing right or doing wrong. And people tend to jump into their intellect all the time. Oh, I've been meditating. Am I doing it right? Does this feel right? And so, I don't know, straight off your original question.
No.
The phrase, it's just my imagination.
Yeah.
Is one of the most painful phrases to me.
Yes.
Because is our imagination not the microscope or magnifying glass by which we look around this data field that exists to examine what's around us and what's possible?
I told you there was another way other than meditation. That other way is through your imagination. You can skip meditation entirely and work with your imagination.
But then you're just making things up.
No.
Yes, thank you.
You're not. You're not making things up. And here's the difference. Your imagination isn't the goal, isn't the end point. Your imagination is just the launch pad. I have a thing that I made up I called Tom's Park. And Tom's Park is for those people who have trouble meditating, that just can't get there through meditation. In Tom's Park, what you do is you imagine. And the trick is you imagine some story. And the story's better if it's full of, you see things, you hear things, you smell things, you touch things. Yep. It's got all your senses going, and it's very engaging.
Yep.
That's the kind of things you have to imagine. You're not just imagining sitting on a toadstool. You have to imagine something that's very engaging. Now, that imagination, if you just get so absorbed in it, what will happen is that you will actually stop making it up, and the story will take off on its own. So you're imagining that you're swimming laps and you're driving a jet ski or whatever it is you're doing there. And as you get into it, you realize that you're not making it up anymore. You're having a conversation with a horse, and you're not making up both parts. You're actually talking to a horse, and the horse is talking to you, and this is in your imagination. Well, what happens is, and I've kind of made an arrangement with the larger conscious system to support the Tom's Park thing, And you get there and you start, okay? And now you imagine you're talking to the horse, and the horse says hello or something that you imagine that a horse might say. But the more you get into it, then you're no longer making up all the parts. It just happens on your own, and you're actually having a conversation with your horse. And you're not putting words in horse's mouth, because the horse is saying things that you would never have thought of saying. The horse starts to tell you about an emotional problem you have had, since you were 3 years old. Well, you're not making that up, and you talk with it, and then
it's an opening.
It's an opening. So you use your imagination until you let it go, and the larger conscious system will pick up to that story, you and the horse and whatever, and pick up from there and start giving you a data stream that picks up on that. And now you're the same place you were if you meditated. You're getting a data stream from the larger conscious system. You're humming along in what we call an out-of-body, and it's just as valid an out-of-body as if you went through the meditation process.
So, and this is, it's an imagination theory, right, in psychology, where you take something that starts as imagination, and it is showing you a window into your actual consciousness, meaning not just what you're consciously aware of, but it could be, and I don't mean to intellectualize it, but I'm going to. It could be, these are the...
We intellectuals can't help that.
Right, but it's like, these are the things that, these are the unconscious processes that are going on, which in a simulation theory kind of language, that's the program has been written, and you're simply tapping into the program.
Yes, right. Now, take one step more beyond that and say that you're a piece of consciousness, right, and you're getting a data stream from the larger consciousness system. Right. The system is interested in you growing up. The system is interested in you changing and becoming love, and it's going to feed you a data stream there. It's not just you wandering through your unconscious memories and things.
Right.
You're actually getting a data stream from the LCS, larger conscious system, that is taking you through a interaction, an experience, and you're going to learn from that experience something important. This horse is going to tell you something you really need to know. You see, it's not just you wandering around in the unaware parts of your mind. You make a connection just like you would out of body, just like you would in meditation, and that connection is entirely real and effective. And why does the LCS do that? Well, as you lower your entropy, the system's entropy lowers, so it's all in its own self-interest to help you.
I want to reiterate that point because it didn't totally land for me, and I was like listening, trying to like feel and sort of sort that out. But what I'm hearing is, if I make something up, which I don't ever believe I'm making anything up, if I go through this creative
part of our problem.
If I go through this creative imagination exercise, and it's true, Mayim's problem with me is that I go off into these, what could this be? And then, of course, some of that has to be brought back and say, what is the tangible reality? And we can't do absolutely everything in the physical realm. I can incorporate a lot of it. Like there's a cost, for example, of redoing all the lighting in the studio or moving things or other practical implications of some of this creative imagination. But if I go and do an exercise like this, what I heard you say is that I'm going to learn something. It may not be that we do the lighting, but some part of that experience will teach me something that lowers my entropy, that increases my overall well-being in some fashion or other, that will also benefit the system. So it's almost remove the end result and be more process engaged. Is that what
exactly right?
Encouraging imagination.
Yeah, it may be just doing the process, and just being aware of the process may be what you're supposed to learn, not the stuff that actually comes in. It's sometimes it's not the thing you get, it's the process of doing it is what's really valuable.
And I've actually seen, we got a little note from one of our producers who's listening, who's like, well, what is the danger sometimes of doing something like this? And I have seen sort of the dark side of the wellness sort of alternative movement, where they disassociate from their real world problems or situations, and they're just lost in creative fantasy, and they're not paying their bills, and they don't know where they're going to live, and they're not thinking about how they're impacting one another. So let's talk about that. Yeah.
That's because they don't really understand what's going on and why it's going on. There's 3 separate sources that will give you information. Okay, you get an information stream. 3 possible sources of that. One source is the larger conscious system. That's typically how we get this reality. The other source is some other consciousness, because there's a consciousness connection. And the third possibility is yourself. You can create. You are consciousness. You can create information. So
just summarizing, so there's the larger consciousness system. There's direct connection to another
person's consciousness.
And yourself.
And yourself.
So there's 3 different sources of this data stream. Now, they don't come with tags. This is you making it up. This is the larger conscious system. This is
it all feels the same.
It all feels the same. There's no tags on it.
It's just information.
You cannot tell the difference between those.
This is maybe one of the most important clarifications in terms of extrasensory perception that I think is out there.
Okay, you get all 3. They're just information. You can't tell the difference. Now, that means that, 1, you have to be always skeptical of anything you get. It might be you that's creating this. That has to be a possibility. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that what you're creating is a problem.
Right.
That it could be coming from you. Now, if you happen to be full of fear, and you're full of ego, and you're full of beliefs, then there's a good chance that the stuff you get from you is garbage. And it's not going to be helpful.
It's consistent. I'd like to say it's consistent.
It's going to probably move you to make poor choices.
Or the same choices.
Which are generally poor choices.
Okay. Getting a little personal there, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you have to always have that in mind. And you have to always be in charge of yourself. You have to be responsible for your own free will. Now, if you go and you're in some sort of state and God tells you to go shoot somebody or go jump off a bridge, you have to think about that and say, what is my free will? Think about that. And my free will says, I don't think so. All right, then you follow what you have to be responsible for yourself. You don't go shoot somebody because God told you to do it. You see, or God tells you that, the way to heal is to eat nothing but spinach for the rest of your life. Well, that's unbalanced. That's not going to work. So you have to always look at everything and assess it and then make your own choice about it. And that choice is informed by your memory, your sense of responsibility, whether you are trying to control with power and force or whether you're trying to become love. It's all part of how you make those choices. So you never know for sure. And you never will know for sure. Now, with practice, you'll know pretty much. You'll get, no, they don't come with tags, so you can always be fooled. You'll never know 100%, but you can know 95% because you've done it thousands of times, and you know what it feels like when you're talking to the larger conscious system. You know what it feels like to get data in. You know what it feels like to communicate mind to mind, and those things are different in the way you process them. They're different in the way they feel when you get them. So you do, but you don't have a tag on it that says, I know for sure this didn't come from me. You can say, well, I'm 99.9% sure this didn't come from me, but you always leave that possibility, which means your own free will needs to make the choice.
A lot of people who are very intuitive, who practice meditation for a long time, can easily say, I'm not sure if I'm afraid of something or I'm actually being shown not to do it. There's sometimes when we try to make a step that is outside of the patterns that we're used to, we gravitate towards familiarity and pattern repetition. It's easy to be fooled without that experience, but with practice, it does become clearer where, I can think back when I was thinking about buying that house years ago. When I moved out and disconnected from the owner's energy, I could feel all of a sudden I was really hijacked by the messages that they wanted me to buy that house so badly. And while I wanted it, I was getting clear that I shouldn't buy it. But it wasn't until I removed myself from that entanglement that I didn't even realize how entangled I was that I could get clarity on what my true messaging was.
Absolutely. That is, that's the way things work. You take responsibility for your choices, and you have to, very seldom will you ever have a 1 or a 0 in the probability. This is absolutely true. This is absolutely false. You almost never get to that point. You don't have enough information to do that. You can say, I think this is probably, I'll give it a 90, or I think this is probably not right, I'll give it 10% that's true. And then as you get experience, you shuffle those percentages up or down or whatever way based on your new experience. But very seldom should you ever get a 1. And you need to be aware of your own, of your own issues, your own problems. So if you're somebody who really likes to please, that's just your personality. You just like to please. If you're around people, you'll do things.
You don't have to define it for me. I know what a people pleaser is. Yeah. You're looking at one.
Yeah. If you're like that, then you have to be aware of that. Right. And if suddenly, you get, you have to buy this house. Well, you need to think, is that just me trying to please because this person really wants, to sell it to me or not, which means the way you figure that out is what you did. You remove yourself. Right. And now do I still want to buy it that much, or you say, well, I'm going to take a week where I'm not going to think about it. I'm just not going to think about it at all for a week. And then I'm going to bring it back up and see if I feel the same. So you learn strategies for dealing with your own ego and fear.
It's knowing yourself on a very deep level.
Right.
I'm going to say something about Jonathan that he may make us cut out of the episode.
Probably.
He talks to the universe, and he sometimes asks it which, if he's looking at 2 protein powders, he asks which he should.
But the protein powder example is not a good example.
But I want him to sort of speak to that, because some people do have that kind of opening. It can energetically feel different. I'm not saying it's not a thing. I just want you to know what I'm living with.
No, I use this tactic most often for much more specific decisions that are often beyond an intellectual understanding.
Right.
Yes, I will actually try to feel food that may be beneficial for me or may not. I don't necessarily do it with protein powder. So I have done it with protein powder. It's not that I've never done it with protein powder, but she actually there's a picture of me that maybe we'll post for this episode where we're in Ashland, Oregon, and I'm lying down and I have one hand over my heart and I have the other hand using it as a muscle testing device as a tool to sort of feel a resonance. And really what I'm trying to do is, instead of seeing or hearing, I'm sort of using auditory feedback, but also using physical feedback to sort of gauge where a resonance is.
Should Mayim be in the same room as me right now or not?
I don't remember but she has this picture of me, and it's this nice picture, but what it does speak to is my belief that we can ask for different scenarios or decision making. And I believe that fundamentally developing our intuitive capability and receptivity is a core part of transforming how we make decisions in this world to navigate towards a life that has more ease, more joy, more happiness. Because when only using the intellect, we're limited by what we can know, and so much of what our experience might ultimately be. There are many times where I've only used intellect and been seriously disappointed, and then used extrasensory ability, and everything on the surface would have seemed like this would have been a great choice, and ultimately I was super glad that I made a different decision.
Well, the thing that you have to be careful with is that you don't give up your free will to some other chooser. Mm-hmm. I knew a lady who had a little pendulum, and she'd hold it up, and if the pendulum went this way, it was a yes, went that way, was a no, and she couldn't,
I know these people.
She couldn't go to the bathroom unless she consulted the pendulum first. Her whole life was directed by this pendulum. Yeah. And at that point, you're giving up your free will. And what will happen if you do that is that the system will make a correction. And your pendulum will tell you to take a long walk off a short pier. And when you hit the water, that's the correction that says, make up your own mind. I'm not, going to tell you how to live your life, the choices you have to make. You have to do. That's why you're here. You make choices. You evolve or de-evolve according to your choices. Getting somebody else to make your choices for you is not a good idea. Make your own choices. Now, you want information that helps you make that choice. You want to get an idea, look at it. Okay, what's the future probability, say, 3 years from now if I make that choice? 5 years from now if I make that choice? And you can go do analysis. You can think about it. You can feel about it. But in the end, it's your choice to make. And if you get in the mindset that, well, I want to make the choice that they tell me, that's the wrong mindset. You have to say, gather information. Now I'll make the choice, and it'll be my choice.
100%. My strategy is always let me feel a possibility of something, gather that information, integrate it back in, and then use a sort of a skeptical evaluation process, but taking that extrasensory data and then bringing that back as part of my decision strategy.
Yeah, that is good. And I'll tell you, about my own experience with that is that the more you grow up, the more you work out of your intuitive side. When I was just a brash, young, arrogant physicist, I worked entirely out of my intellect. I ran my life with my intellect. Everything went through my intellect. Now, probably 80% of my life is lived through my intuition. My intellect runs 20%. Because your intuition, if you develop it, can be more accurate and more reliable than your intellect. And the reason for that is your intellect has this wonderful tool called logic, but logic requires a lot of information. You can't be deductively logical without a whole lot of information to give you and therefore, mostly you don't have that much information. So you get to some point and then you got to jump, which is, your intuition's making the jump, right? But if you do that from your intellect, make that jump, then it's a 50-50 whether it's good or bad, because your intellect isn't good at making guesses like that. It's your intuition that's good at that. So I tend to live my life out of my intuition. So my intellect hops in when there's something that needs, thinking, analysis. Then it jumps in and does that. But when I sit down, and let's say I meet you two, I walk in, I meet you two. Well, I immediately get information about both of you, about who you are, how you feel,
what color was I?
what you're, what you're thinking about. When I was younger, I'd get it in my intellect, and then I process it. But mostly now I don't. I get it because I was living through my intellect. So I needed to get the information, use the intellect, use the information. It's not like that now. Now I live out of my intuition. So I don't actually get it at the intellectual level. I get it at the intuitive level. So then I know maybe places to go and places not to go when I sit and talk with you, and things that, I get a feel for your energy, where you're coming from. And I get all of that in the first 3 seconds that, as I walk in the door. That just comes because my mind, it's not that I have to look at you to get it. It doesn't have anything to do with your body. I could be 1,000 miles away. Makes no difference. But when I come here and I walk in, then suddenly I'm a part of a thing that's going to take place.
I gave birth in that front room. I wonder if you could sense that.
So
I think about the vibes of a house, though, right? When you walk into a house, you sometimes can tell, like, ooh, something doesn't feel right, right?
Yeah, sure. But it's the house, it's the people. I mean, it's everything. And my intellect no longer sorts it out. Oh, this person's dressed. This person's wearing a ball cap. What does that mean? It doesn't do any of that stuff. It's just...
My head is very shiny on camera.
It just, my intuition picks it up, and then I interact mostly with my intuition, not with my intellect. So it just takes care of itself, and I don't really bother. So when I get to the store and I got 2 kinds of protein or something I'm looking at, my hand just goes and gets one of them, and that's okay. I'm all right with that. It happens to be the wrong one. Oh, that's okay. I'll be okay with that too. So basically, if you don't have any expectations, then you never have any disappointment. So
that's a saying from Al-Anon.
So you just, deal with your life as it comes, right. Mostly intuitive, and let it all wash out however it does.
We have two things we'd like you to explain, meaning in terms of this framework. I'm curious because I've been learning about neural retraining programs, which are supposed to sort of calm the nervous system down and try and encourage, limbic overactivation to calm down. And one of the, sort of techniques of a lot of these neural retraining programs is very similar to what you were describing in terms of imagination. You have to imagine, as part of the protocol for one of these programs, you have to imagine a future scenario, make up anything you want, and you have to engage as many senses as possible. What does the environment look like? And how do you feel? And what are you smelling? What are you tasting? What is the color? Like if the feeling had a movement, make that move, all this stuff. And so the idea is to use imagination to sort of build and sustain a positive feeling, right? You're setting an intention for a future probability. But I'm curious if you can describe in this sort of language that you operate in, what is trauma? What is a reactivation of trauma? When people feel triggered, when we find ourselves going down the same pathway, the same negative thinking, the same perseverative, thoughts and feelings. What is that in the system?
What that is, it could be multiple things, but what it is dominantly is fear. It's just fear. The person has a fear. It could be anything, but mostly the fears turn around things like inadequacy, not being lovable, not being competent enough, being, all those kinds of things. They have fears about being wrong, not getting it right. And those fears get triggered. They get triggered by somebody, here's another thing. If you have fears, you tend to create that reality. You create it by your expectations. You create it out of your fear to be the things you fear. So here's an example I use often. If I'm outside and I say, look, the sky's a beautiful blue. And most people would just say, yes, it is. Somebody who's very insecure would say, are you trying to tell me that I don't know what color the sky is? You see, they interpret that because they're feeling insecure about not knowing, not being whatever, and they'll take that I was trying to tell them that the sky was blue, and then they get upset.
I know that person. It's not you, don't worry.
They get angry then. So they won't, comes up as a good example is the guy who lived in New York City and was afraid of wild elephants. And he saw wild elephants everywhere. He saw, see that bush and the wind's blowing around? There's an elephant hiding there. See that puddle on the ground? That's from an elephant's footprint. So he found signs of wild elephants all over New York City. Well, of course, there are no wild elephants in New York City, but if you fear them,
they're at the zoo.
You'll find them. They're not wild at the zoo. But if you find, if you fear something, you will tend to find that.
Are we shifting the probability? Are we shifting the concept of a probability?
Oh, if you are negative and you have fears, those fears will make the probability of whatever you fear will make that come true. We make our fears come true. And most people spend most of their time in a negative state. Very few of us just are happy and enjoy life and everything's fine. Mostly we're crunching over annoyances and things, and people said this, and all of that negativity produces more probability for negativity. Just like being happy and positive makes higher probability for happy, positive things happening. So yes, you create your own reality in a couple of ways. One is by your thoughts, your intentions. If they're negative, you create negativity around you. That's one way. The second way is by the way you interpret things. If you're negative, you tend to interpret things negatively. So suddenly your life is more full of negative stuff. But those are two powerful ways that you create your own reality. Through your intentions, change the probabilities, through the way you interpret the data. Okay? So yes, if you're positive, then your life is tended to be positive. and people say something that would annoy you, or it doesn't annoy you. Even if they just outright say something really ugly to you, you think, well, it's not about me. It's about them. I wonder why they, said that. Maybe I should talk to them a little bit.
Well, that's the entire culture of microdosing is trying to elevate everyone to that point. Which
But
I
again,
it's about. Yeah.
But then you're using something to help you do something that you're not capable of doing.
Right.
Well, that may be civilizing in the short term, but it doesn't help you grow up in the long term, is the problem with it.
Bruce Lipton talks about this on a cellular level and on an environmental level. I mean, it's, we often say this to our listeners and our viewers, like, I don't know how many ways we can tell you, like, it's all the same, right? It's all the same. It's about a connection with something greater than yourself, right? It's about understanding yourself on this deeper level. It's about, being able to set an intention of positivity.
It's also about doing the work in the moment when you do have a thought of annoyance or frustration, that you have some tool or method by which you can pull yourself back from that ingrained reaction to build the new pathway.
More tools than others.
But you are changing your reality, not just in a sense of your feelings, but you're actually changing your reality. The mind leads, the body follows. Your body reflects that. We create a lot of physical problems for ourselves.
Well, autoimmune conditions rampant among women.
And it's not just in our bodies, but we create those attitudes that the people at the office then come at us with that upset us.
Right.
We create those attitudes. So if you're negative and unhappy, you'll create an environment that feeds your unhappiness.
Oh. The other thing we wanted to talk about was past lives. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Jim Tucker, but I was recently turned on to the work of Jim Tucker, who's a psychiatrist. And he works with children who have very, very complicated recall of, I don't even want to say past lives. They have a complete emotional and biographical recall. That is not something they've read on Wikipedia. It's not something that's a book that their parents read that they overheard. They have very complicated and elaborate, in many cases, emotional connection. Sometimes they have proclivities towards a profession that this past life, and this happens in cultures that do not just have reincarnation as part of the vernacular. It happens in Western cultures and things like this where it's not so much part of the vernacular. Right. Is past lives a thing? I've had regressions done. Like, I don't know. A lot of it is imagination, but then I'm thinking maybe it starts as imagination and then I'm pulling data. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I can talk about that. There is this database that starts as that the system needs it in order to do the rendering of the virtual reality. The system needs to know what is possible, what are all the possibilities to happen next. This is in the future. Mm-hmm. What happens next, and what's the probability of that happening?
Right.
Okay. That's important because the way the system tells what happens next, because it's a probability-based system and not a deterministic system, is it takes a random draw from a probability distribution of the possibilities. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not a random draw from the possibilities. It doesn't just randomly draw a possibility, but from the probability distribution of the possibilities. Right. So the things that are more probable are more likely to be drawn. Okay? That's how it decides what happens next, because it doesn't have a deterministic history to say what happens next.
Like, anything could happen.
Yeah. So it could bring out that 1 in a million, could happen. Okay? But it won't happen very often because it's not going to draw that, but maybe once every million times. Mm-hmm. So that's how it determines what's next. So in order to do that, it needs a database that's basically of all the things that could happen and the probability they would happen.
That's how the probability is designed.
Yes, that's the database it needs, so that when you dig a hole in your backyard, what's going to be in there? Roots and rocks, that's highly probable. A gold doubloon in California, maybe, so there's a certain probability. Your grandfather's pocket watch, he lost it. It's possible. There's a lot of possibilities. So one of them gets drawn out, and that's what you find in a hole. Okay, so that's the way reality works. That's how you tell what happens next. Now, that database is couple of things about it. One, the further it progresses out, the rattier it gets, because you're saying, given the last one was true, what's the next one? Given that one's true, what's the next one? So now the system, as somebody does something that's unexpected, and we humans go off on wild hares enough that we do things that are unexpected, then it has to recalculate the things that are downstream from that particular action. Okay. But it doesn't have to recalculate everything. So anyway, as time goes by, what was in the future becomes the present, goes into the past. Right. So now you've got this big database that goes into the past of everything that could have happened and the probability that it would have. And through that big database is a thread that defines what actually did happen. But it's got all the possibilities, and all their probabilities go with it, because that was part of the future probable database. Mm-hmm. It just gets old, and now it's past. So you do have this database of everything that has happened, everything that could have happened, and a thread of what did happen. So that's this big database that people talk about. Now, yes, your past life is in there, and it's there with the data.
Your past life at some point was a future possibility that didn't happen.
Your past life was at one time a future possibility that did happen. That's the thread of what actually did happen. Right. And there's a lot of things that didn't happen. Right. But they're all carried here. Right. So now you can go into that database and you can say, I'd like to see what would have happened if I had married Susie instead of Sally. Okay, I married Sally, but I want to know what would happen if I had married Susie. And I could say, I'd like to know that, let's say, give me little vignettes every 5 years for 50 years. And then you'll get that information. Now, there's a probability, not necessarily that it would have happened because you weren't making choices, but it would just go through the probabilities. And then you could say, instead of giving me that as the most probable things that would have happened if I married Sally or Susie instead of Sally, you say, I want the third most likely thing that would have happened. Then you'll get a different thing. That'll be the third most likely happened. All the data is in the database. You have to tell the database what it is you're looking for. So when people go back into that database, they don't understand that they need to have their intent make a query that is specific to what actually did happen. There's lots of probabilities in there, and if they don't know that, then they tend to wander around in probabilities rather than actually get the information that they're looking for. So that's one problem. Now,
also, children aren't necessarily choosing this.
No.
Like it's dropping in like it's been downloaded. Right,
exactly. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. The most common reason for that is, there's a good example. It was a little boy that was an airplane pilot that got shut down someplace, and he knew the plane, he knew
the kind of injury.
He knew the kind of injury, he knew the guy's name. Yep. I mean, he knew
a lot
everything about it, and it all turned out to be true. All right, now, why does that happen? Why does this happen to this little boy? Mostly, and there's various reasons, but the major reason is that the larger consciousness system is using this little boy's memory to help wake up a whole bunch of people and give them the message that life isn't as simple and straightforward as they thought. There's other attributes to it, and it has to do with beyond the physical. That's just opening people's minds, because we're getting to this fast part of the curve, and people need to be aware of that. So there's all kinds of things the system does to help wake us up. Basically, it's a wake-up call, and it just says, reality is more complicated than you thought.
It's not necessarily that this kid was that person or anything like that. They're using him as a messenger.
Yes. So they can use him as a messenger to do that. He's got the right parents who are going to take it seriously. They're going to write it all down. They're going to check it out.
They go to ABC News.
So on. They're going to call the news. So it's possible that was his experience, but it doesn't have to be that way.
He's just remembering something.
He is remembering. He's got all the memories. He's got all the details. He's got all
the data.
They come right into his head. When people ask him, well, what kind of plane was it? Comes right out of his mind. He's not
remembering it. He just knows it.
He just knows it, exactly. And that's what's going on for the most part. There's other things like that going on at the same time.
What about people who have like a really intense sense or knowing that they have experienced other lifetimes or memories with someone in this form? Is it that they really did reincarnate from a different time period in history, or they're just remembering other possible timelines where their consciousnesses have interacted in different forms.
It could be either one, or it could be that the system is just putting that in their mind to tell them that life is more complex than they think.
Or telling them that, hey, there's something special between
There's something
this and
special
moment,
between
so
this.
increasing the weight of the importance.
Exactly. So it's some sort of thing like that.
I like that because it actually kind of lessens the need to convince people it's true or it's real, because kind of whatever information we have is true and real because it exists in our consciousness.
But you wouldn't want to say put that on a young child who was in a situation where instead of making the news and being an amazing thing, he gets put in an asylum or a home for people who are having hallucinations and given drugs. So you wouldn't want to just let that happen to anybody. You'd have to pick the situation where it was going to turn out to be better.
So I had a very interesting experience with my son when he was, I want to say about between 2.5 and 3.5. And I don't quite remember because and the timeline's important because his language was somewhat limited. And so I don't remember when the language developed enough for him to not have this experience. But there were, I don't know how many times a week it was, like 3-4 times a week, that he would go to bed, be sleeping, and then he would wake up like wildly upset, but he was like still asleep while he was upset, and he was kind of screaming, and he would be saying he can't breathe. Yes. And we would try to wake him up and tell him he's safe and whatnot. And his mom is on the
energetic spectrum.
Yeah, she spends a lot of time exploring that realm, and believed that she had been his mom once before, and she had dates and times, and we did some creative exploration both together actually, and kind of got different pieces of a puzzle that put me in his life as a caregiver, him as her son in a different lifetime or different time frame, and that there was a fire, and that he actually died in that fire as a young child. And this is over the course of like several weeks or even months where we're getting little pieces of this information. He's still having these night terrors, and they keep getting worse. And at one point, he wakes up and he's screaming, I can't breathe, and he's gasping, and we tell him the story. And this is an old memory, and at one point you were in danger, and you're not in danger now, and we're both here for you, and you came to us, and we love you, and we're going to protect you. And we tell him this whole story, and he quiets down. His eyes are never open during this when he's waking up at night. Goes back to sleep, never has another incident again.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you fixed the problem. Sounds like you fixed the problem. Again, you can't be 100% sure why anything happens or the reason for anything happening. Could be any number of things. The fact that it fixed him then would make me think that there was some truth to that, and just giving that to his mind so he could locate it. In his mind, he's maybe in a fire. But now this locates it as, oh, that was sometime in the past, and and suddenly for him it's like it comes into focus. Now he doesn't have to be so terrified of it. It's a memory, and he gets that even if he's asleep. So it may be something like that, and indeed that was what it took to fix it, and that you and your wife were getting information to help him fix that problem because you were aware that it was a problem. And of course, he's your child, and you don't want the children to be in terror like that. So your mind is inquisitive. What is it? What could it be? And when your mind goes out like that, it pulls information in. So the information may or may not have been accurate. That's not the point. The point is that whether it was accurate or not, it worked.
I mean, I'm getting extremely emotional because there's another piece to this. As a kid myself, my parents had a cottage north of the city that we grew up in. And for no reason that I can remember, when I would go to sleep in one of the bedrooms, I would constantly think about the large tree that was outside of that bedroom and think of what would happen if a fire came, how would I escape the house and crawl down this tree. And the tree was, really big. And I would, every time, only in that bedroom would I imagine myself having to escape. And I have like, I wouldn't say irrational fear of fire, but I am like, it really bothers me when there are wildfires.
I'd say there's paralysis. There's emotional paralysis.
I get
It's significant.
It's like I have an issue.
Yeah.
Like I think we should have clean air, and I think that's important to be able to breathe. And I lived in a town that was a mountain town, and it was in a little valley, and smoke would come into the valley, and it often would not blow out, and you would have AQI of 150, and it's seeping through the walls, and everything smells like, and then you get a headache, and it's really unpleasant. And I had to, I never felt settled in that town because I loved it. But every summer I would have this experience, and I never had the fear of being burnt up. But now when I think about, I never put all three of those pieces together, the fear as a child, the past memory of that experience with my son and the information that came in, and then my present fire terror. And I don't know. It all sort of like, all of a sudden, all three of those blocks just became clear to me. And I was like, oh, wait a second.
I'm turning off my intellectual brain.
Yeah, often the things that happen, you'll find there's a lesson in there for all the participants, not just the one. It wasn't just the son, perhaps. It was also something for you, maybe something for your wife too. Often there's a lesson for everybody in that. That's just basically the way the system works. It's trying to optimize the possibility of you making better choices. It also is optimizing your son, not, being so afraid. But it just tends to work that way. Things that happen, the system's very efficient. And if it can get 3 birds with 1 stone, it'll do that. It'll come up with a way that works, because it's got all the information. It knows every thought and emotion that you've had, and it knows what emotions and thoughts you're likely to have, and it knows what your past was like. It's got all the information. So it's not that hard for it to come up with something that will be a positive. And even if it takes you 20 years to figure it out, that's all right. The information's in there for you to use when you're capable of using it.
Before we let you go, what are the signs that entropy needs to be reduced, or that you are on the right path to reducing entropy?
I think of it like, as we move towards a more expanded consciousness life, are there, for example, synchronicities or moments that show us we're on the right path to help us continue?
He gives different data than I do.
But let me go with the last one, and then you can ask the other one again if I didn't address it. Yes, as you evolve, as you grow up, and that's not act better, but are better, okay, you will find that, one, your decision space is all the decisions you're aware of. Now, you may get to a fork in the road, and there'll be a decision of this way or that way. But I'm talking about decisions in general in your life. Like, there may be 5 possibilities that you see, and you have to decide which road you're going to go down. But there actually may be 20 possibilities, but you only see 5 of them, because those others are outside of your experience base. So out of those 5, define your decision space in that problem, okay? So decision space is, what are the choices I have? And it doesn't matter if you're in jail for life, okay, you can't go home for Christmas, but there's other things you can do. So you always have decision space. You don't, that's your free will to make those choices. That's basically what free will is. That you get to pick something that's in your decision space, even if your decision space is small because you're in prison. It's not as big as it was if you were out. Well, you still get to pick from the ones that you've got. Now, as you grow up, I say grow up means, increase your quality of your consciousness, lower your entropy, all that. As you grow up, your decision space grows. The information that you get grows. Because say you walk into a room and you understand it. You understand the people, where you're going, what you're going to do, and you feel comfortable with it. So that's more information than most people get. If somebody comes and says, oh, my grandmother's having a hard time doing something, you immediately know what's wrong with your grandmother, what's wrong, and was she going to get better? Is it going to kill her? You get this information just because your mind goes, oh, poor grandma, and comes the information. So you live in a different world with different amounts of information. And you tend to live in a world where you don't set your intellect working on that information. You just keep it in your, in kind of your own space. It's in your own intuitive space that you know these things. But you don't really operate on it. You do in the beginning because you're curious. Oh, does your grandmama have this? Because you want to know if you got the right answer or not. But eventually you get over that and you just live in that space. You find that your life is good. Synchronicities is a way of life. Things that are not normal happen to you daily, even hourly. Things just work out. It's one of those things, if you were to fall into a cesspool, you'd probably find a gold brick at the bottom of it. It's that sort of thing. Life just works for you. And you kind of rely on that. And you don't really bother too much about how is this all going to work out, because it'll work out however it does, and that'll be fine. So you're relaxed, you don't have much stress. So yeah, you have all of that. The life gets more positive, gets better. Your life is generally full of joy and happiness, and you feel satisfied. And you just go through each moment when it happens. You make your best choice. This is the way learning takes place. Stuff happens, and you get to make a choice. Now, most people try to manipulate the stuff that happens so that it happens in a way they like. That's where they spend their energy, trying to manipulate to have things come out the way they want them to come out, the way they know it's going to be best for everybody. So they do that. But rather than spend time trying to manipulate things to come out the way you want, you just let them happen however they do. And when they do happen, you do your due diligence, which means you think about it, you feel about it, sort of like your two different kinds of protein. You feel about it, and then you make a choice. And then you look back at that choice and say, was that a good choice or a bad choice? And why? And then you learn something, and then you go on. So some people have a problem of making choices. Well, I don't know the right answer. What is the low entropy path? I've got 5 choices, and I don't know which one's low entropy. Of course you don't. You never will. Get over it. You don't have to make the right choice. Life is not about making the right choice. Life is about learning, about growing up and becoming more. So you do your due diligence, you think about it, you get all the information, you try to think what's the low entropy choice, and then you make it. And then you see what happens. And if it doesn't work out well, you learn from it. And that lowers the probability you'll do it again because you're aware and you learn from it. So you should never feel like, I don't know what the low entropy choice is. You don't have to. You just make a choice, learn from it. The worst thing you can do in this reality is make a choice and not learn from it. If it's a bad choice,
repetition compulsion.
Yeah, if you don't learn from it, then you just get to do it again, and you keep doing it again and again and again for as many days or as many lifetimes as it takes for you to get it. So that's, kind of how things work. So yes, now I live mostly in intuitive space. And if you're aware of that sort of thing, you tend to be turned into that. You'll notice that I'm here and I'm gone, and my mind is kind of else, and it comes back with information. And it's not something I intellectually do. Oh, I have to go out and find that information. As I need it, it comes. And it comes as I need it, when I need it. And for me, it's just the way life works. If you need some information and it's available to you to help you make the choice. But you only get there by getting rid of the fear and the ego and the beliefs, because those things scramble what you know. They make you come to wrong conclusions, and then they take your information and garble it, basically, because your interpretation of that information is now twisted to fit your fears, twisted to fit your beliefs.
And comparisons, disappointments, wanting something that didn't work out. We should really be seeing anything that doesn't work out as oh, that wasn't supposed to happen, and it wouldn't have been good for me if it did.
Yeah, for the most part, you do that, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to justify everything. Stuff happens because it happens. Stuff may happen to me because somebody else made a decision to do this. I may have an accident out in a car because somebody made the wrong turn or thought it was a two-way street and was only a one-way street. So stuff can happen to me. But my point is, I don't take it personally. It's just stuff happens, and I deal with it. So if I get a broken leg or something, then I wait for it to heal. And I'll probably learn something from the process of not being able to walk for a while. Will be a learning thing. Learn to be patient. Learn to depend on others. Learn that you can't always do everything for yourself. So you turn everything into a learning situation. There's almost no experience you can have that you can't learn something from. So life best becomes a series of learning. Now, you're the person you were talking about. They said it was a series of tests. Well, yes, everything's a test. You get a broken leg, it's a test. What do? Feel sorry for yourself? Woe is me, that jerk did this and that, and you blame it on people, and you feel miserable. Well, it'll take your leg twice as long to heal, and you'll be unhappy and miserable and so on. Whereas if it's, my leg, and I hope it heals well and good, and you put positive energy, suddenly it heals twice as fast as anybody thought it would, and you're back up again, and everything is fine. So it's not blaming others. It's not judging others. It's just accepting life as it comes and making your best choices. And it's very simple. It's just a very simple way to go through life. And the more you grow up, the more information you have in order to make that work better. The more ego and fear and beliefs you have, the more you twist that process into something that is non-functional. So that's kind of how you get through life. It's just simple. Let stuff happen. Think, do due diligence, make a choice, learn from it, and go on.
Before we let you go, are you a fun person? like, do you like music, movies? What's your...
Okay, am I a fun person? Yes, I am a fun person. Can't you tell that I'm a fun person?
But what kind of movies do you like?
I don't watch movies very often because I don't find them very good for the most part. And I'll have to tell you, I've never seen a single issue of the, Big Bang.
Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang.
I haven't watched commercial TV for probably 45 years.
Wow. Do you like music?
I love music.
What do you like?
I like almost everything
Okay,
except,
but go ahead.
Except I don't like so much country music.
Okay. You and cows. Cows don't like country music
Cows don't
either.
like country music.
I don't particularly like the country music. I find it a little whiny and very simplistic.
Okay.
I tend to like music that's more complex.
Okay.
I tend to like fusion, jazz, and rock.
Okay.
I like my rock kind of loud and screamy. I like
classic rock. Or what we used to call classic rock.
I like.
Are you like a Fleetwood Mac person? Are you a Grateful Dead person?
See, I don't know any of those names.
Beatles?
Yeah, I like all of that.
Okay.
Okay, I like music that's emotional.
Okay.
The music that it's all about the words.
Yeah.
I never listen to words. When I listen to music, there are no words. The voice is just another instrument.
Interesting.
I hear the voice and it does whatever it does.
Do you like classical music?
I like classical music.
Okay, got it.
I like classical music. I don't like all of it. Some is very repetitious, and it just kind of cycles. It comes in cycles and goes around. And sometimes it's and it tends to be busy.
Yeah.
Without being interesting.
Okay.
Other classical music.
Do you like folk music?
I like. If it's not simple, most folk music is boom, boom, boom. You got a little tune. It's a little tune, and it just repeats over and over again. I don't mind not being complex if somebody is really. I like blues.
Okay.
Okay, blues are great because
that's just 3 chords.
It's emotional music. It's simple, and it's repetitive in its form, but it is emotional. It's about feelings. It's about something that means something important to somebody. And that's significant to me. So yeah, when I say loud screaming rock, I don't know how to tell you that. Remember James Brown? Do you remember Ray Charles?
Yeah,
sure.
You remember all those.
I mean, those are also blues,
Yeah,
heavy
they're kind of
blues
bluesy.
yeah, kind of
Bluesy
foundations of
rock.
rock and
So
roll.
blues, rock, and jazz.
Okay.
I like jazz music, contemporary jazz,
Okay.
but mostly that has the feeling in it.
Amazing.
Like if you pull up Miles Davis and get
Yep.
his album Sketches of Spain,
Love it. Yeah,
that's
beautiful.
a beautiful work.
My older son is Miles
Yeah.
for Miles Davis.
Yeah, that's a beautiful piece.
That is a beautiful
That album
piece.
is wonderful. It's one of my favorite albums. And it's not because Miles is very good about hitting every note just right.
Sure.
He doesn't.
It's very emotional.
He mangles a lot of them, but
Yeah.
it's got a lot of feeling in it. And you can just disappear into that feeling very easily. So that's the kind of
Amazing.
music that I like. But yeah, you ever remember the song "Bad to the Bone"?
Yep.
Remember that?
Yes.
I had a lady who was living with us at the time, taking care of children and cooking meals and cleaning the house and stuff. And she came up to me one day and said, "Have you heard that song?" And I hadn't, because I was real busy then, and I didn't. If I listened to music in the car, it was because I had a CD player in the trunk of the car. Yeah. I listened to that. But anyway, I said, "No, I never heard it." And she says, "Well, somehow it reminds me of you. You and that music just go together." So I said, I have to hear that. So she found it and she played it for me. And I thought, what does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with me? But then I played it for Eileen, who's maybe back here someplace. I don't know. And she said, "That's you." So, but it's me, not in a way that I'm bad to the bone, but just, I'm a physicist, and I seem to be very intellectual, that very maybe, I wouldn't say conservative, that's the wrong word these days, but like most intellectuals are. Yeah. But
do you cry?
Yes, I do. More and more than I ever used to. When I was younger, never. Never a tear would leave my eyes, but now I cry at everything.
It's a sign of maturity.
Yeah, I cry at everything now. But in any case, I tend to be, I have a good sense of humor. I love the joke.
Your book's very funny. I mean, your writing is very funny.
Every couple of pages or something, chapters, it has some humor in it.
Very playful.
I am that way. I tend to joke around a lot, and I tend to be a little wild and crazy.
I don't find that hard to believe.
Good, but I do. In this situation, I'm very buttoned down in business and intellectual, and we have to say things. But in a private environment, I don't get up on tables and put lampshades on my head. I'm not that kind of guy, but almost everything comes out of my mouth is humor. I'm not very serious about anything.
Well, you are the favorite rabbi I've ever had on this podcast. So thank you so much. I do recommend My Big T.O.E. It is dense. It's worth working through. And obviously it's a trilogy as well. Please tell everyone where they can find your binaural beats and everything else about you.
Well, go to my website, which is www.my-big-to and .com. And you will find everything there. If you want to actually get what the theory is about, you'll find most of that there. You'll find packages to buy, like binaural beats, and there'll be lots of them, but they're not expensive. So buy a bunch of them and compare them, because a binaural beat that works great for you today may be one that doesn't work for you tomorrow. It depends. What you bring to the table is one of the very big variables. It's not just that everybody's the same and these binaural beats will do everything for everybody. It's very personal, and you're different. You're different hour to hour, much less day to day. So play around with them. I also have some a thing there called Exploring Consciousness and Everything Paranormal, where I teach you how to do everything paranormal. All the things we've talked about. I teach you about remote viewing, mind-to-mind communications, talking to your dead Uncle Fred, all the things that you might want to do, healing, all that. And I explain them, how they work, why they work, how you can learn to do them, what not to do, what to do. And again, that's not really expensive. It's a 5-week training course that's intensive. If you take it over 5 weeks, it'll be 5 intensive days, but you can take it over 5 months or 5 years if you want. You just learn faster if it's intensive than if it isn't, but you can do it. So if you're interested in paranormal, that will explain to you what the paranormal is and how it works. I have a couple of other products there. Tom Spark is one. If you have a hard time meditating, this will give you, something to put in your mind that's productive, that leads you to be able to do the paranormal things at the end of it. So that's another thing. Okay. So that's where you can get stuff. I've got a YouTube, and my YouTube has probably 2,000 videos. Way too many videos for you to figure out which ones to watch. So I also, at the website, I have a search tool that will search those thousands of hours of video by subject. I also have at the website a tool that is called AI Guy. Mm-hmm. Now, you haven't gotten to AI Guy yet in the books. You just looked at book 1, which is no more than an introduction. Right. The serious stuff is in book 2 and book 3. But in any case, AI Guy is a character in my book 2. And this AI Guy has my voice. It has been trained on all those thousands of videos. Wow. It has been trained on the books and everything I've ever said. So it is about as close to me as you can get.
Amazing, but not as fun.
But not as fun. It doesn't make jokes like I do. Anyhow, it will answer your questions very much like I did. We've tested it many times. They have a whole bunch of questions, and I answer them, and then they put them in the AI Guy to answer them. And I'd say, 98, 99% gets them right, because it's not just any AI, but it's one's been trained on my stuff specifically.
I could do a spin-off show with his AI.
That's right. You could just talk to him all day.
You could, but it's good. So that's another thing we have. But in general, it's a community. I don't have millions of people following me, but I have 100,000 or so. And we have a community that has its own newsletters and things that go out. We have meetings. This May, I'm going to Spain for 4 or 5 days doing events. I've been around the world a time or two. I've been to Germany 5 or 6 times, and everywhere they speak English, because otherwise I have to do it with an interpreter. Yeah. So I speak to places that there's English. Actually, I had a German interpreter when I was there, but one of my biggest audiences is in Germany. The people who are very rational. My books, I intended them, it was written by a physicist, I intended them to be an on-ramp for left-brainers. People who live by logical process don't have an on-ramp to the spiritual or to the non-physical or any of that. So my books are made to be logical, and they drive right-brainers crazy because they're too logical, too much process. They are not an easy read, and you have to read them very slowly.
Well, I really enjoyed the first, so I'll tackle the others as well.
Yeah, I think you'll like them even better. There's more and better information as you go. But anyhow, this has been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Such a thrill.
I thought maybe we'd talk more about mental health, but that's all right.
We had too many other things to talk to you about.
So maybe we'll do it again.
Oh, we would love that.
People ask me about, a lot of those people get locked up. Is that because they're having real connections to the larger conscious system and just nobody believes them? And that's a problem. If you have that connection, you need to keep it to yourself.
It's also about, can you integrate it, or does it sort of take you over, right? If you're channeling an enormous amount of information and you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, well, then you have to kind of back up again. You don't want to overwhelm your own free will to deal with it. Yeah. So you have to back it off and say, okay, what does this mean? If you just open yourself up to it and now you're a channel and you're just blathering things that nobody can understand, that's not going to be helpful to you or really to other people. Yeah. So you do need to make sure your free will is in control of what's going on. And if it's more than you can handle, then make it stop. Right. It will obey your free will. You can make it stop. Like those people that are too empathetic. Can't go into a Walmart because it drives them nuts. All the vibes. We know those people too. Yeah, and you can turn that off. You can turn it off selectively. Not only turn it all off, but you can say, I only want to be able to hear those people who have a birthday this week. And then the crowd will disappear and you'll only hear from the few people who have birthdays this week. You can open and close those portals with your intent. And most people don't know that, but you can. It just takes a little practice of developing your intuitive side. It has a lot of things that it can do. It's your mind. It's the core function of your mind is this intuitive spot. The intellect is kind of something grafted onto the side so you can deal with the world. But dealing with being a human being with other people mostly comes out of your intuitive side. And we don't develop it at all. We just let it sit there in language. We were smarter intuitively when we were 3 years old than we are now as adults mostly. But yes, you can turn things on, turn things off.
There's more to talk about for sure. Thank you so much. I don't even know what to say about what just happened.
You would have to say everything about the entire universe and its construction and how to live your life.
I hope people will go and check out the resources that Tom has on his website. The books are very dense. I'm not going to lie, but I just feel like we got him to share so much of his wisdom. We're so grateful for people listening to this episode. And if you missed the first one, go back and listen to it.
Also, after the episode, I got maybe one of the best hugs of my life.
Yeah, he definitely, there was a deep connection between us and Tom. And yeah, he's a hugger. Who knew?
If you're watching the video, I'm wondering if people can pick up his presence. There was an intensity about him.
He's very intense.
You can feel people who have changed their frequency. He's been meditating for how many years? Decades? Yeah. And there is a level of presence. He sat for over 3 hours without a restroom break, without saying an or an ah, like he barely paused. There was like 2 moments in 3 hours where he didn't have just a stream of consciousness that he was able to share with us. And I'm really kind of amazed.
It was really very, very powerful episode. He did remind me of some of the more mystical guests we've had. He reminded me of Michael Singer.
That's what I was going to say.
Very heavy Michael Singer vibes, which, not what you'd expect from a physicist.
Michael's an economist. And I remember when we spoke to him, you could feel his presence through Zoom.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't in person. And that's what I imagine it would be like.
I mean, look, it's, I don't even know what else to say. From our breakdown to the one we hope you never have, we will see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or 2. One fiction, one. And now she's gonna break down